We're all grounded in symbols. Now, I've seen witchcraft packaged in many different ways, but never so cleverly as this one. This is Harry Potter. And this is the book right here. And this is the first book that was out. Now, Harry Potter, actually, this is a craze that came out just before this last Christmas. In fact, just before Christmas 1999. And it amazed me that I was seeing more reports that children were asking for this book and the series in this book more than they were asking for toys. And I thought, that's kind of unusual. Because here, the Christmas before, the biggest thing was what? Furbies. Everybody had to have one. Okay? There, one time, you know how Christmas goes. One time it might be Power Rangers, and your child has to have one because everybody's got one. And then there might be Pokemon because every other kid's got one now. And now it's gone to Harry Potter. And what we need to do is we need to look at Harry Potter because I want to tell you something. This is nothing more than unadulterated witchcraft put in the form of a child's book. And if your child reads this book, he is receiving a curse. And if you read this book to your child, he or she is receiving a curse. Because I want to tell you something. The spells that are in this book are very real spells. They're not something somebody came up with. This is written actually by a British authoress named J.K. Rowling. And J.K. Rowling is a professed witch in England. She wrote these books, and she said that she sees things through her mind's eye. And how many know that's a New Age concept? Remember about supposedly having a psychic eye in the middle of your forehead, and you're supposed to be able to see into the psychic world and receive all kinds of information and things of supernatural ability to be able to share those things with others through your mind's eye. She says she sees things through her mind's eye and then writes them down, and that's how she came up with this book and this character, Harry Potter. Now, she also goes on to say that she was going to actually write 4 books and then stop. She actually had the plan for 4 books. But then she said that she had such a popularity rise in the books of Harry Potter when the very first one came out that she said that she decided to do a 7-book series. And there are 3 books now that have been released and are actually published and out on the market right now. And there are 4 more to come. And now I just read about a week ago in a magazine, she was doing an interview with a magazine, in fact it was Life magazine. She said that the 4 to come were going to be even darker than the first. So there's 4 more to come, praise God, we're always looking for them, aren't we? Now, the interesting thing about this is if you go into bookstores looking for Harry Potter, good luck. Because most of the time they're sold out. They're that popular. And what we need to do is we need to look at Harry Potter and see exactly what this is. So let's examine Harry Potter and the story of Harry Potter. Now, this is actually the second cover of the book. What you're seeing up here, this book is actually the first cover that was printed in the United States. But the first cover, the actual first cover, was actually printed in England. And what they did was they actually changed the cover because the British people were putting up an uproar, and they said that they didn't want that cover on their book because these right here, where you see the diamond shapes, were actually pentagrams. And so there was something about that that allowed the British people to see there was something wrong about it. The other thing is that the very first book was called Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. And then all of a sudden they changed it to Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. And now if you'll look at there, you'll see all kinds of symbology. Take a look at Harry Potter and you'll see the lightning bolt in the P. And we also stated in the last session that the lightning bolt was a symbol of Satan. Okay? So Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. And now you see, over in this corner, here are demon dogs. Over down in here is a unicorn. there are several symbols, because if you look closely in those pillars, if you could actually see them close up, you'll see faces in those pillars. And at the top here, okay, there's your triangles, and they've even got the triangles into here. And Harry is riding on a broomstick. And the premise of the story is this. Harry Potter is a boy who's a 12-year-old who his parents are killed in a car accident. And Harry survives that car accident. He was with his parents at a very, very, very young age. And now he's an orphan, and he's sent over to England to live with his aunt and uncle, who are horrible to him. In fact, they treat him like a nobody. Well, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to read for you right off the book itself, because that'll help support what it is. Listen to this. Harry Potter has never played a sport while flying on a broomstick. He's never worn a cloak of invisibility, befriended a giant, or helped hatch a dragon. All Harry knows is a miserable life with the Dursleys, his horrible aunt and uncle, and their abominable son, Dudley. Harry's room is a tiny closet at the foot of the stairs, and he hasn't had a birthday party in 11 years. But all that is about to change when a mysterious letter arrives, a letter with an invitation to a wonderful place he never dreamed existed. There he finds not only friends, aerial sports, and magic around every corner, but a great destiny that's been awaiting him, if Harry can survive the encounter. Now, Harry is a nobody. He's living with his aunt and uncle, the Dursleys, and they have an abominable son named Dudley. And Dudley treats him like he's an outcast, doesn't accept him in part of the family at all. But Harry knows there's something about him that's very special. And he receives an invitation in the book. He receives an invitation by a giant that comes knocking on the door one day. And Harry opens up the door, and the giant has a message for him in the form of a letter. And you know what? It's an invitation that he join something. You know what that is? Hogwarts School of Wizardry and Witchcraft. And so Harry thinks, gee, why did I receive this invitation? I must be important. I must be special. And so Harry runs off from his aunt and uncle's home. He jumps aboard a train, and he goes to Hogwarts School of Wizardry and Witchcraft, where he learns how to cast spells, how to summon spirits, how to do hexes, how to form symbols. And you know what? So does your child. Because as I said before, the things that are in this book are in actual witchcraft books. This is in the form of a children's book. And you know what gives Harry his specialty? Harry was born, he was special, and he wonders why he receives that invitation. And Hogwarts begins to tell him why he was so special enough to receive the invitation to join his school. He tells Harry that Harry was in that accident, and that accident, by the way, the accident that killed his parents, was a form of a lightning bolt coming down and destroying the car that they were in, blowing it up. But Harry survived. But he was also born and received from that accident a particular scar on his forehead. Look here. That's the scar right there on his forehead. Do you know what it is? A purple lightning bolt on his forehead. So now that's what makes him special, because with Harry's purple scar on his head, he now has psychic abilities, and he's able to do things that other people aren't able to do. And he knows things that other people shouldn't know. He knew things before, but he didn't know why. Now he's seen as very special. And you notice how that appeals to the child, because now the child begins to identify with Harry. How often is you talk about a child, and how often has a child mentioned about, gee, I just want to run away. Mom and Dad have strict rules too. I just want to run away. So he starts associating with Harry, because they can identify with that. And it makes it look as if you want to be a somebody, you can be just like Harry Potter. You can become a wizard too. There are a lot of books on the market about witchcraft, but I'm telling you, this is the one that's packaged in the latest form of a children's book. And the thing about it is that now a lot of parents are starting to read these books to their children, and now they're even getting into the story of Harry Potter. I'll tell you a true story. I was on the plane to Dallas. It's kind of a funny story because, I mean, this is actually true. This is actually true. I was at the plane and getting ready to leave Dallas to go to Corpus Christi, which was I think about 45 minutes to an hour flight. And it was one of those twin-engine planes. And we went out to the bus. I mean, the bus took us out to the plane, and we sat there. We sat there. And we sat there. And we sat there because there was no crew. And they kept radioing back, we ought to have a crew. Somebody needs to fly the plane. We're supposed to leave. Oh, we were supposed to leave 30 minutes ago. And they radioed back saying, well, the crew's here, we just don't know where they are. True. So the crew's here, we just don't know where they are. So we're starting to, make jokes about, well, I better go look in the bar somewhere. They might be in there. But I looked over, and right away from me, there was a lady sitting here, an older lady, and then there was a younger lady, probably in her 20s, that was sitting on the other side of her. And the way they talked, I could only gather that was her daughter. The younger one was her daughter. But she was sitting there reading this hardback book, and I kept looking at that book because it looked familiar, but I couldn't place it. And I kept trying to get a good look at it, and I couldn't. And so she took it with her on the plane. Finally, the crew came out after about 45 minutes, so we're supposed to take off. The crew finally came out, and after we told them, to send them through a breathalyzer, make sure before they got behind the wheel of that plane, we took off, and we got to Corpus Christi, and I still kept, all the way down the flight, I kept trying to get a look at her. She was sitting right in front of me, but the chair was so high, I couldn't get a look at the book. I kept trying to look around, but I couldn't get a good chance at it. And so I said, I said, there's just something about that book that I recognize, but I can't place it. And when we landed in Corpus Christi, she got out, and she got ready to take off her seatbelt, and she stood up to get her things out of the overhead storage bin, and she put the book down on the seat. So, of course, I raise up and look down, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. And it was amazing that somebody of her caliber and somebody of her age would be reading Harry Potter. Because I'm sitting there going, why in the world is she reading Harry Potter? This is a children's book. But again, the mysterious thing about this is now parents are starting to get into the story of Harry Potter. Not only are their kids identifying with Harry Potter, but the parents are too. And at grieving, I've had ladies come up and tell me, Christian women come up and tell me, at about 5 different cities that I've been to so far on the tour. And I mean, they have tears in their eyes. And I said, what's wrong? And they said, you remember when you talked about Harry Potter? And I said, yes. And they said, our children are being required to read that at their school. Required reading. And you sit there and you go, what in the world is going on? Librarians think it's great. Parents think it's great. Because now little Billy, for the first time, is reading a book. Little Sally has never shown any interest in any kind of literature at all. Praise the Lord. She's spending about 6 hours to 8 hours a day reading Harry Potter. Isn't it wonderful? Sure it is. It's witchcraft. It's exciting. And your children begin to identify with Harry. And the darker that it gets in the story, the more they start to identify with Harry. Take a look at the picture again. Look really close and look and see if you see other symbols in here. Now, this is more of a blown up type version of that. On the hardback book, it actually shows the stars even better. I don't know whether the camera can zoom in on that close enough or not. On the hardback book, it actually shows it better. And the stars on this are actually inverted. The stars on this are actually inverted. So what it means is that it shows satanic symbols right there on the cover of the book. And you think that's by coincidence? Absolutely not. They know what they're doing. J.K. Rowling knows what she's doing. Because remember, she's a professed witch. Here's the second book. It's called Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Now, audience, what has Satan always been symbolized as? Serpent, right? Now, how many see the serpents in the cover on this book? How many see the one wrapped around the pole here? There's one here, one down in this cave, one here coming out. How many see the one in the pole over here? There's the head, there's the eye wrapped around that pole. Here's Harry Potter, bless his heart. Now you can see his purple lightning bolt scar right there on his forehead. It's what gives him his ability, his psychic ability. And Harry is holding on to a phoenix, which is a mythical bird and a big symbol of reincarnation. And you notice it's called "And the Chamber of Secrets." In this story, now Harry discovers the secret of it all. And listen to what it is. Harry discovers that his parents' murder, because it wasn't an accident at all, his parents' murder was caused by an evil wizard called Lord Voldemort. And Lord Voldemort now is after Harry because Harry is destined to become a very powerful wizard. And Lord Voldemort wants to be the very best powerful wizard. And he hoped at the time when he destroyed his parents, Harry's parents, that he would also destroy Harry too, so that he didn't reach his destiny. But now that he finds out that Harry is right there at the school and learning these things, and that he's destined to become a very powerful wizard, all Lord Voldemort wants to do now is destroy Harry. And now it becomes exciting. Now your child can't wait for the next book, because is Harry going to survive? Is Harry going to find out his destiny? Is he ever going to reach his destiny? What's going to happen to poor Harry? What's going to happen to all the friends that Harry's met? By the way, at the school of Hogwarts Wizardry and Witchcraft, Harry's friends are all witches and wizards. And in the book, there's a message that goes out to your child. You know what that is? That the witches are the good guys, the parents are the bad guys. Portraying us, and I mean Christian parents, to look like we're a bunch of fools. That we are cruel, and that our rules are too strict. And now Harry is treated with his best family, and his best family now are witches. Practicing witches. Isn't that amazing? And again, now your child begins to really identify with it, and it gets exciting. Now I want to read to you what she states, meaning J.K. Rowling. Here's what she actually states. In that same interview, here's what she says, and I think this gives it away. She says, the idea that we could have a child who escapes from the confines of the adult world and goes somewhere where he has power, both literally and metaphorically, really appealed to me. And you know what? It also appeals to your child. Because how many times has your child, have you ever asked your child, am I too strict? Do we have too many rules around here? You know what their first words are going to be? Yes, you do. You know, that's their first reaction. You sure do. And how many of us can identify when we were kids? We all reached that point where we wanted to run away. We thought there might be something better. And that starts to really get into your child's psyche, in other words, their mind, and starts to implant an idea. And that idea is that you can be a Harry Potter, you can be important, you can be special. All you need to do is become a wizard. All you need to do is give yourself to the dark side, and you can be important too. Now remember, I told you there are 3 books that are out to be published. I understand the 4th one's about to be released. And remember that J.K. Rowling, the authoress, said that the next 4 to come out are to be even darker than the first 3. If that wasn't enough. So that's the 2nd book. Here is the 3rd book that's out. It's called Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. And here is Harry, and here is one of his little friends, and this is a witch, and she's riding on the back there. You see with her pointed hat. Here down in the corner here is evil Lord Voldemort. This is the one that's out to kill Harry. And Harry is riding upon a griffin, which is a mythical bird that's supposed to be half horse, half lion, and half eagle. And again, this is a witchcraft symbol, an occult symbol. And I ask you parents, do you think somebody just came up and said, oh, let's just throw that on there? If they didn't know what it meant. If they didn't know that the whole ideology of this new schooling is to induct our children with symbols. Instead of teaching them with words and morals and values, we're going to teach them with symbols. We're going to teach them to identify with symbols. I want to read to you right here out of the pages of this book, because page after page brings the reader into timeless battle with the forces of good and evil. In fact, Hogwarts tells him, Harry, that there is no such thing as good and evil. There's just power. And the amount of that power determines how good you are or how evil you are. Think back to Star Wars. That's the same message. Exactly the same message. Here's from Hogwarts theology, right from the pages of the first book here, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Listen to this. Here's Professor Snape, and he's the one who teaches potions. And he says this, I don't expect you will really understand the beauty of the softly simmering cauldron, with its shimmering fumes, the delicate power of liquids that creep through human veins, bewitching the mind and snaring the senses. A centaur's view on astrology. He says, we have sworn not to set ourselves against the heaven. Have we not read what is to come in the movement of the planets? Or have the planets not let you in on that secret? Once introduced to the occult, the child begins to crave more. That's designed to do that. It's not by accident. It's not by coincidence. It's designed to do that. They easily find it in their neighborhoods and schools, because I'm telling you, every bookstore now you can walk into and ask them if they have Harry Potter. Most of the time they will. But the very first book is the one that's hard to find. You can't find copies of it because parents have bought it, children have bought it, and sadly to say, aunts and uncles and grandparents, I've talked to several of them that have bought that book for their children or grandchildren to read. Can you imagine reading this as a bedtime story? And then having your child go to sleep, dreaming about witches and evil Lord Voldemort, and wanting to have a lightning bolt on their forehead? And we wonder why our kids have bad dreams. Could it be the stuff we're reading to them or telling them before they go to bed? And you can identify things because now, even in big bookstores, Barnes & Noble, by the way, I was watching on CNN one night, about 2 weeks before I went on tour. How many know if you watch CNN sometimes, especially late at night, you can pick up some good stuff? And I was just happened to watch CNN, and I was watching for sports stuff, and they came on and they showed this news clip. And what the news clip was talking about Harry Potter and how big a phenomenon it was. And they were doing interviews with librarians who were saying that it was just great because now children were taking their time and actually reading material. And one librarian says, I don't care what it is. I don't care what it portrays. I don't care what kind of ideology our children get, just as long as they're reading. So in other words, she's saying, I don't care if it's witchcraft. If they're reading it, that's great. And they were doing interviews with parents. And the parents on there said, oh, I think it's just wonderful. My child just never thought about picking up a book before. And we tried to get him or her interested in books before, and they just were boring. I'm telling you, Harry Potter is not boring. To them, it is not boring. It must not be boring to parents, too, if many parents are starting to read it. And it's fascinating. And on this same clip, they actually showed a Barnes & Noble bookstore. And they said that outside of this bookstore, they were having a Harry Potter party. Try to say that 3 times. Harry Potter party. And in this party, you were to come dressed as your favorite character. And they showed the camera going down the line of all these kids standing with their parents outside of this bookstore waiting to get into this party. There was not a book signing party. I mean, the authoress wasn't there. There was no thing special about it except that it was just a Harry Potter party. Something that you could go and celebrate your favorite character. And they were all outside dressed in their favorite costumes. And you know what? The most prevalent character of all was Harry. And the way that you could tell that is that here were hundreds of children, boys and girls, who had painted lightning bolts purple on their foreheads. And we look at it and we say, that's innocent? Oh, that's just a children's book? That's just a story? That's not real. And you know what? We sit there and probably tell our children the same thing. Honey, you don't have to worry. Those people don't exist. That's not real. There's nothing in witchcraft. That's just on TV. See, that's what I thought before I really got into it, was that witches were just on TV. And I had to find out for myself. I mean, I was just determined to find out if there was any such thing as witches and any such thing as magic. And that's what got me into deeper and deeper into it until I finally ended up into the darker side of it and got to the highest form, which is Satan worship. Praise God, came out of that. And our children are being fascinated and surrounded by peers, because peers are now actually giving peer pressure onto our children to get involved in these things. Now, what do I mean by that? Listen, let's say, for instance, your child doesn't have Pokemon, but the boy next door does. Now, he thinks that Pokemon is just the greatest thing to come along. And he plays it religiously, okay? And now your son or your daughter is associating with that child, and your little 2-year-old or 3-year-old, 4-year-old, however old they are, is now getting peer pressure from that other child saying, how come you don't have it? Don't your mom and dad love you? My mom and dad loved me. They bought me Pokemon. I wanted Harry Potter. They went out and got me all 3 books. Your mommy and daddy must not like you. Now, what's that playing in your child's head? So now you can understand why they come to you, and for the first time, you're wondering why they're asking you for Pokemon. You're wondering why all of a sudden they're interested in something called Harry Potter. Because they're receiving peer pressure. Other kids are reading it and they're sharing it. You know, kids love to share information with each other all the time. I mean, sometimes you have a child in the room, you can't get a word in edgewise. You know, and they love to talk and they love to share things with each other. And if Harry Potter is what they're sharing with each other, that's what they're doing. Harry Potter is nothing more than unadulterated witchcraft in the form of a child's book. That's one of the dangers that are out there right now, trying to infiltrate the minds of our children. And they're doing a good job of it, because I'm going to tell you something. This is on the bestseller list as the #1 children's book. You think about Tom Sawyer and all the stuff that we used to read. Well, I don't know. I'm not going to give my age away, hopefully. But you read all the things that we used to read as children, and then you look at the things that our children have in front of them that they have the opportunity to read. And I'm telling you, when you look at that, and you look at that as you know, the surface of it, and you look underneath that, and you're sitting there going, wait a minute, we never had this when I was a kid. We never had witchcraft books when I was a child. You know, but these things are out there, and that's what they're designed to do, is to get our children interested and inducted into witchcraft and Satanism by making it look fun. And the whole message is, it's fun to be a witch. It's fun to be a wizard. You can be important. You can be to the point to where you don't need mom and dad. You don't need grandparents. You don't need aunts and uncles. You are a master. And as we did in the last session, isn't that what everything that we've been studying so far gone to show? Isn't that been the underlying message? The child becomes the master. You're the master, you become the ruler of your home. So now we wonder why our children rebel, and why it seems like my goodness, little Sally just got really obstinate lately. Everything we tell her is no. And then we wonder why. Because they're being taught to say no. They're being taught to rebel against parental authority, that parents aren't needed.